You got control? All right, great. We'll see how this works out. Hi, everybody. My name's John Michealson. I am a architect. I work for Checkpoint Software. When they were doing calls for prezos this year, we were kind of thinking, well, what can we do that would be very relevant and, you know, also kind of mind-spurring. So what I've put together here is more about thought leadership. There should be no product relation in here. At the end, if you're interested, I'll be around for a while. We can talk about product specifically, but it says Checkpoint on here, but the majority of what I've got going on in here is more about what's going on as far as the SDN landscape and where we all, you know, should be thinking about moving forward. So really, kick it off. Checkpoint's been around a really long time, and there's only one kind of thing that I want to mention about Checkpoint before we kind of move on, and that is we are Checkpoint Software. We didn't even sell our own appliances until 2008. So if you're existing Checkpoint customers, you're going to see a little bit of kind of our design in this whole thing in the first place, and how we do things, and how we've always done things, and how SDN is kind of just moving forward, kind of the ideas that we've always had, which is kind of nice. So, moving forward, really simple. Why are we here? Why does SDN matter? Well, we used to not care. I didn't care. In the 90s, when I was building token ring networks and working on mainframes, I didn't care. My network guys, they didn't care. They did not care at all. They gave us a perimeter, and they were just kind of over here, you know, trying to not pay attention. I've got a perimeter. I've got this internet thing that's kind of new. Whatever. Doesn't matter. But as we built our data centers, as we built out our data centers, we've got all these different pieces, and we just protected the outside. And that was it. And in fact, there's even a kind of methodology to that. Oh, I got that a little backwards. Sorry. I moved all my slides around last night trying to desensitize Checkpoint from this whole thing. But anyhow, IT security really got confusing. We had the perimeter, but then we had all these apps that started coming in there, and what do we do about those? We've got Facebook. Yeah, everybody's using it. Whether we want to acknowledge it or not, this stuff's here. Office 365 is something that's fairly new, although there's been other things like Dropbox and all these other tools that have been around for a very long time that all of our customers internally to our organization are using, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. It's there. And as they come in, there's just more and more and more. And there's just nothing we can do about it. We can't stop the flow of this stuff. This is modern, right? So what do we do about this? Well, we need IPS. We need encryption between sites and internally at some points, depending on who you work for. URL filtering, app control, and all of these different technologies, and that's how we handle it, really. And when we're talking about that perimeter design, can we do that inside? It's a little more difficult. A little bit of background. This is kind of what I was doing in the 90s. Plugging things in, just moving forward, trucking along, not really thinking about it. But what did we add? Well, first thing we needed was firewalls, because ACLs just weren't good enough. Then we had to add authentication servers, because now I can't just have machines all over the place. You guys remember Windows 3.1, right? No authentication, things just came up and worked. Then we moved on. We had to have VPN gateways, and this weird thing called wireless came on, and we had wireless gateways. And for context, my wireless gateway, in about 2001, I had 7,000 wireless clients all over the Twin Cities, because I worked for the transportation organization, and every bus had several wireless networks, and it was a lot of fun. But what kind of authentication, what kind of security was around it? Not a whole lot. We had all the assessment tools, hardened router switches, and, network intrusion detection, all of these different things, the antivirus firewalls. All of a sudden, well, now this is a lot of stuff. How do we handle all this? There's an overarching theme here, is that This is a whole bunch of stuff that used to be not too bad when there was one or two or a stack of them, but now it's everywhere. When it comes to things like treatment facilities, whether it's clean water, dirty water, doesn't matter. Things that are on the list at the federal level that need to be protected. All of this stuff has to be there. And generally speaking, it's complicated. One of the organizations I used to work for ran all the waste treatment plants for the Twin Cities. Okay, well, that doesn't sound so bad, right? However, what happens if somebody lets the effluent out into the river with, I don't know, half a tank of chlorine or any of the other nasty chemicals that could get used? Now, clean water is what we all think about when we think about things that are important, right? Because that's open the tap. If it's poisonous, well, I'm going to kill 30, 40,000, maybe 1,000 people, hurt them, whatever. If you poison a river, you're killing counties and entire states worth of people. So needless to say, it was really, really, really scary to me when I went to one of our treatment plants one time. And because we had this routing loop and I couldn't figure it out, I ended up having to drive 10 miles out in the middle of nowhere, and we get there. And, well, I ordered this thing so I could get to it from home. Well, all of a sudden, our entire network was completely run over because the person in charge of those two plants had added this line. There's nothing we could do about it. So we need all of these types of tools. And we get into we even get into the encryption back and forth nowadays too. Just more and more and more and more. And the analyzers, that's the really big thing. I personally have had to deal with every one of these technologies, and it sucks at a scale. Just flat and simple. So what Forrester has been telling us for a number of years now is that there's no more chewy sound. We're talking about that old mentality, the older design mentality from the early 90s when we didn't care what was on the inside. Well, now we do. And the only way to really deal with this is not trust anything. Oh, that sounds complicated. How do we handle that? Well, realistically, what it comes down to is that all of these little pieces, every single one of them, has to be authenticated and verified, have an encrypted channel, absolutely all of these types of things in order to get to where we need to be. And really what it comes down to is this massive management overhead. There's technologies that have been able to do this for years and years and years. NSX is not the first thing to come to market that can handle this. However, unless you worked for the federal government or dealt with banks 10 years ago, you didn't care. That's really what it comes down to. The market's changing, and SDN is really enabling all of this type of stuff, enabling security in a much easier fashion than what we used to do, what we used to have to do. So moving forward, segmentation's new perimeter. How many people have heard that, right? The last 2, 3, 4 years, I work for Checkpoint. I've been here about 5 years. Everybody's been pushing this, right? Well, it's true. Until you have things like Target happen. And then you have things like Home Depot happen. And then you have, and on and on and on. I know, I handled Target for a number of years. I'm tired of talking about Target. I'm tired of hearing about it. But they were our Hiroshima. That's what happened. That's why we're all still talking about it. What needs to change is the visibility needs to go up. Microsegmentation is the new perimeter, yes. That's actually not something the security community has been pushing. This is something that specific vendors have been pushing with newer technologies. And I have come to believe that those newer technologies can become security enablers for everybody. So, if we think about the evolution of the data center, pretty simple, physical, right? Everybody knows what a box is. The second tier is the virtual data center. Well, that's like 15 years ago. Anybody remember GSX? How about LPAR? Yeah? LPAR's virtualization, and it's been around how long? Quite a while, right? I mentioned mainframes in the beginning. What was that? Same thing. This stuff is not new. It's just got a new label on it because it's become commodity. So as we're having conversations with customers, I prefer architectural, high-level discussions. I don't like getting in the weeds about tech, this, that, or whatever, just because it's not really constructive. From my perspective, what I try to do is have a conversation with the folks at this table, or this table, or this table, and try to raise that so these different groups within organizations are actually talking to each other. Well, private cloud has kind of forced that. And I'm going to single somebody out here. So what's your opinion of what private cloud, what's the definition of private cloud? Your definition. Well, sure, that'd be public, but what private? Okay, that's a great. Yep. Anybody else? So the definition for private cloud really is the same as column 2, except now we've added APIs to it to automate things. That's really the only difference. Am I using VMware here? Sure. Am I using KVM or Zen? Sure. OpenStack, whatever. Sure. Doesn't matter. Over here, it's the same thing, except perhaps I've leased it from somebody and there's a bunch of APIs in it, or I'm doing the APIs in my own data center. That's it. I'm automating things, and that's the only difference. So when your executives, or maybe you're an exec yourself, your C-levels, when they're talking to other C-levels, yeah, we just built this wonderful private cloud thing, and on and on, and we can automate that. Well, no, that's all they're talking about. They just upgraded their data center to 1.2. It wasn't a big thing. It was not a big jump. The big jump really is the hybrid. When we have private cloud, or public cloud, excuse me. Public cloud is your things like Azure, HP, AWS, things that you can get to and operate from home, right? Well, what did AWS really do to push the market? What AWS really did to push the market was they established a really great code base. It wasn't that they had this wonderful virtualization tech. What they did is they wrapped all their APIs around it so you can write shell scripts that'll fire up entire data centers. And I've actually got a couple things, if we have time at the end, that if you want to see, I can show you some of this stuff. And it's just one line, as long as it's prepped right. And the private side of things, that hybrid, all that is the merging of the two. So now I've got my private data center with APIs, and I've got the public data center with APIs. And I merge those two, and that's hybrid. That's it. It's not super complicated. And, there's vendors out there that are spewing just piles of acronyms at everybody, and that's all they're really saying. So, one really big part of this, well, I'm getting ahead of myself, sorry. I'll move on. So, this is a data center. We've all got them, whether it's that big or smaller. Mine's one rack, but everybody's got them. And kind of the common theme here is companies, very large companies, have gone and honestly, let's just call it what it is. They've laid people off and outsourced. A lot of companies have done this. Now, what I'm seeing is that folks, where I'm from Minneapolis, so there's a lot of big companies that have outsourced to, like TCS. If any of you guys use Tata Consulting, they've even, one of the larger ones in town, they even are using them for architecture now. So the people we deal with are senior architects, and there's 4 of them, and they run a multi-billion-dollar company's network because they've outsourced everything else. That's just one aspect, and what I'm seeing come around is that this happened, and a lot of my friends that work there, they all had to find jobs. 3 years later, these architecture teams, what they're having to deal with is the fact that these people don't exist anymore. Yeah, they got TCS or whatever other company, but it takes 9 months to roll a server. 200 days is average now. It's really ridiculous. Then the other thing it adds is that when you have people in the data center making changes, you're incurring additional risk. So what these large companies that have outsourced are finding is that they're having to turn to software companies and going, we need automation. I don't have people to do this anymore. Even when I had people, it took 100 days to get something done, and now the time is doubled, tripled. It's horrible. So this one, Gavin McCants, I would encourage everybody to go watch this. It's from 2012. And this is my entire summary of what we should be doing in terms of FSDN landscape. And if there's app people in the room, if there's C-level people in the room, I don't care what you do, but if your application developers are not thinking this way, they're doing it wrong. That is my opinion. And a bunch of people on my team, because, we live this stuff. What CERN did is they had to change the mentality entirely with their new data centers. Because everybody that wants that got that copied down? Just Google the data center evolution. There was a webcast in 2012 and really kind of opened my eyes to what's going on. They had to change their service model. And, if you don't know who CERN is is a research facility. They're the largest and most heavily funded research facility in pretty much the world. They run the super collider, that big ring, smashes atoms, right, in Europe. Lots of computing power. If you've seen any of the charts about how much processing Walmart uses over Thanksgiving, believe it or not, these guys use half of that, and Target is a tenth of that. These guys actually have more processing power and dynamic content management than some major retailers because of the data that they're crunching. Anyhow, they had to change their entire service model for the next-gen data center. What we used to do is we had pets. We had servers. And we owned them, and we loved them, and we fed them, and we took care of them, and we patched them, right? We upgraded them. Well, that's fine. They're unique, lovingly hand-raised and cared for, right? Something gets sick, nurse it back to health. Sure. That's what we did with server farms. Now, in a SDN landscape, we have the automation baked in that will allow us to treat them like cattle. And the server people don't want to hear this because it means learning new things. That's really what it comes down to. But we've got pets and cattle, and in an SDN landscape, in an automated environment, whether it's any platform, I don't care what platform it is, if you're patching something, you're wasting time. If you're not dynamic, your competitor's going to eat your lunch. And that's all it comes down to. This entire model relies around the fact that your cattle, your VMs, your service machines can be shot at any point in time and replaced. And it takes a little thinking to get around this, but this isn't just AWS, this is not just Azure, this is the modern data center where I build things and pull up a specific Docker stream live as a new banking connection comes in. And that specific instance gets torn down and thrown away after that connection goes away. I know banks that are already doing this. Some very, very cool stuff. I thought we were ahead of the curve last year, and then I saw that. I was in Toronto, and one of our customers that happens to be very good friends with my boss showed us some of the really cool stuff they were about to launch. And they actually, unfortunately, they were able to lay off about 1,800 people, and they're a team of 30 now. But because of all this automation, yes, huge reduction. Absolutely ridiculous. That number went down to about 120 for the first year as they built all the new automation, and then that number went down even further as they went into the status mode. Anyhow, the point is, it's because if I bring a machine up and I don't like what's going on, just get rid of it, start a new one. Done. That's it. Total different mentality change. Hopefully you've seen this before. This specific slide is actually give credit where credit's due. I stole this infographic from EMC a couple years ago, but it's really, really informative. It's got a lot of data in it. This thing is, stand out here, sorry. The transformation factory, really, we're going from the old way of doing things. We're making Model A's, Model T's, one server at a time, whole teams of people building routers and switches and shipping them out and getting upgrades done and all this kind of stuff, out to completely automating everything. And up at the top here, the software-defined data center. And that's the whole point. It's not just an acronym. It's where everything is going. You wouldn't believe it. I've even been to customers that only had, very small data centers with a couple hundred servers, and they're going after this full automation model too, because they know if they can't be agile, some guy in a basement writing code is going to take their customers. And that's reality. That's actually what everybody, needs to deal with. The future is very elastic, load maintenance, all of these kind of things. Scripting is king. That's all it comes down to. Now, IT as a service broker, this part in the middle, with the automated and repeatable portion, that one to me, I twist that a little bit and say, let's take this automation and enable security at a higher level. Because if I take the fact that I don't have to check a bunch of boxes, plug in a firewall, plug cables in, put servers in, the fact that somebody doesn't have to do all that means that inherently the complaints about security should start to dissipate. If I think about security up front, and as part of my deployment, actually plan for it, so if I'm scripting this many lines of code, if I'm scripting a couple hundred lines of code in order to roll out servers, VMs, and load balancers, and I'm doing all this, it's actually really easy to have a couple extra lines talk about app firewalls or IPS or whatever I need. This number, I'm sure you've seen this over and over. I couldn't bring myself to take it out. The real thing we're worried about here is this lateral traffic inside, because that number is something like 80%. Most of your traffic is inside the data center. I assume you've seen something like this by now already too, with the CapEx and OpEx and this kind of thing. When I mentioned the large companies laying everybody off, that's where the OpEx savings is not saving anybody money. Azure's not going to save you money. I don't care what Microsoft says. Not going to happen. AWS is not saving you money. It's about operational flexibility. And that's really what it comes down to. That whole agility column. That's the bigger deal. Has anybody ever seen an application service catalog? I've got a video I'm going to drop to in a little bit. I don't want to waste your time if everybody's already seen it. It's basically the web portal that your admins would go to when they request a server and new servers just appear. Boop, there they go. But that's really kind of where we're going to. This guy here really has to do with the frames. It's more of an explanation of the specific technologies that everything I'm just kind of summarizing, glazing over. But really, Hypervisor, and I got to change the color on this one, that didn't turn out so good. Hypervisor, I don't care what it is. Again, Azure, KVM, ESXi, I don't care what hypervisor it is. The SDN layer, there's a lot of players. What I've seen most recently in the last 14 months of running around doing my job is that companies a year ago, they were doing this internally to determine who's going to do ACI and who's going to do NSX. That was kind of the big fight. Are we going to do ACI? Are we going to do NSX? Your data center people, they want the VMware product. The network people, they want the Cisco product. That was a year ago. 99% of the conversations I have with customers now are about which parts of each are we going to use. Most customers at a large scale anyway are going to have both. And they're starting to realize it. So I don't care, SDN platform. I don't care which one it is. Cloud management, pretty simple. That's the orchestrator that talks to all of these things, right? And again, the fact that I say I don't care about ACI or NSX or Nuage or who it is, doesn't matter, right? And there we go, I forgot. All right, next. So we do have some new challenges, and I put the questions in there because I don't think they're new. I think it's just a revitalized conversation because new technology today, not Windows NT, new technology today is allowing us to do things in an easier fashion than we had 10 years ago. 10 years ago, to get to the level of integration that we have in some of the technologies that are coming out now, was very, very difficult. It was very, very expensive. So, first one's the perimeter gateway. All right, we know that. Have to have one. We got it. But what it doesn't do is protect your lateral threats, right? All it takes is one admin to log on to the console of one Windows box and go to their Dropbox or go to their Gmail or open anything, and the whole farm could be toast. That's all. Really simple. Number two, this is the harder challenge. Changing IP addresses, things are sleeping, they wake up. We're all starting to build these VDI farms now, so people don't have workstations and they can have remote access and all this kind of stuff. A VM wakes up that doesn't have a patch, all of these different things. It's all about that dynamic content piece. That's really what it comes down to. Especially since those farms are moving all over the place, right? Now we've got VXLAN. Kind of like GRE, only on steroids. Take a machine, put it from data center A to B. It'll hide the subnet changes. I don't care. Cisco did something like that a couple of years ago, but it didn't really take off except at a large scale. Mainly because I think they tried to do it on a hardware platform that had a lot of limitations. So, the third one is all of these things with all your platforms. That's really where we're going. Private cloud, public cloud, private cloud, it doesn't matter. How do I handle all this stuff? Really, it's all about managing. I've got all those tools. Remember that slide with all the red tools all over the place. How do I handle all this? Well, as we move forward, how do I manage this? That's the bigger question of the day. As we go forward, Red Hat, is this a big list of all the cloud service providers? Yes. But huge choices. Companies are going through this and going, oh my God, what do we do? They've all got their own APIs, mostly JSON based. So those old dogs in the room, more gray hair than I got, JSON, learn it, live it. You're going to need it. All these different tools have their own security feature sets. So does it make sense for you to try to use vCloud Private Data Center with Azure or with Fujitsu or with any other service provider and then try to use their security tools, which for the most part are nothing more than overgrown ACLs with some logging? And that's not just, saying that out loud because I work for Checkpoint. That's actual fact. Go and read some of this stuff. Amazon's ACLs, for example, they're security groups. They didn't even have good logging until a version came out this spring. And even then, guess what they do? If I want to log, I have to insert more quarters. Because if I've got a server and I want to log off of this flow, well, I got to use the flow monitor. All right, quarters, that's a service. Where do the logs go? Oh, they go to my box. They go to my data. They go to the S3 bucket. Well, that's another quarter. So you can turn on logging, sure, but you're going to use a specific feature that you should have just baked in. Very high visibility is key. Azure, I have this one pausing here because I want to make one point. A year ago, Azure was nowhere in terms of my visibility and my customers. It was all Amazon, it was all NSX, it was all ACI. If you are an MSP or some of the really big dogs, you're talking OpenStack. The MSPs are all talking OpenStack with Cent or Ubuntu and KVM because it doesn't cost them anything. They can dev it, and the people that dev it can move on because they're contractors, and then they can just operate it. And they can build really, really slick interfaces and all this really cool stuff, but overall, it makes them more money. This is where VMware has had a hard time with the MSPs because they are expensive. In the MSP's ISP landscape, they don't like that. Anyhow, Azure is easily 40% of what I do today, 1 year later. VMware and these other companies, they poke the bear. Microsoft is spending an enormous amount of resource, capital, everything in order to overtake everybody. In the Central region alone, the VP of Azure Networking has 120 recs open. That's a lot of bodies nationwide. The data centers themselves are purpose-built, unlike AWS, which was an accident. And if you haven't heard that story, I'll give you the rundown. Got time. Amazon built their cloud to support their customers. That's not you and me. It's Netflix. It's monster companies, right? The excess capacity became AWS. It became sellable to us once they realized they could actually act like they were making money using it, selling it, right? Azure is purpose-built. The networking actually is better. If you heard about this thing of classic versus resource group mode, resource group mode can be considered Azure 2.0. Hit July-ish last year, changed all the APIs, pissed everybody off, but it's better. The last point I'll make is that because there are 3 main security dev centers for Azure, if you're a Checkpoint customer, you'll be interested to know that Tomer Teller, who used to go around to conferences like this in Black Hat and is a fairly well-known person in the security circles within the U.S., he was Checkpoint's chief evangelical for a number of years as well. He's actually one of the heads of the Azure security program. He went to Microsoft a couple of years ago. He also brought a whole bunch of people from Checkpoint with him. A wonderful relationship with them. It's actually really, really cool to be able to have conversations with their product managers directly and all that kind of stuff. So, moving on. This part is just a personal feeling. Having dealt with VMware and other companies for a number of years, I feel HP, Oracle, everybody else is just asking you to trust them. Buy our stuff, it'll be all better. No, it won't. You're going to get locked into a specific vendor. If you're looking at Azure or AWS, for example, they have these things called Direct Connect and Express Route. They're a fiber-based service, right? Straight to your company. Cool. I don't have to do VPN over the internet, and I don't have to pay for VPN gateways. Great. Now you've got a hard line with a monthly bill straight to your cloud provider. Are you stuck there for a while? Yes, you are. It's a business plan. It's a business model. So just pay attention to that. Moving on. I feel strongly that the top of rack, best in class model is thoroughly broken and needs to be tossed away. And if you look at some of the Gartner stuff that's coming out in the last 18 months to 2 years, they're starting to agree. Previously, I bought the best product from everybody. If you had that kind of money. Otherwise, you used a couple smaller integrated solutions, right? What happened? Oh, forgot to click. Sorry. APIs are king now. Period. End of story. If you're not using APIs to integrate your security solutions with your network solutions, I can't help you. You wouldn't believe how many conversations where I've been in a room with some executives and their architects, and I've actually had to offend the architects because, it just works like this. And like, some of these people have no idea what they're even talking about. Well, I just go to Amazon and I get a console just like VMware. And he's sitting there telling his CIO that, and I looked at him. I don't want to get this guy fired. But it's all about the API. Integrating. That's it. I really believe this. One of the things I lifted from this conference in Calgary, and this gentleman's actually one of the founders of the BSD movement in its entirety. So I'm just going to go through that, where operational security is irrelevant from our perspective, from Checkpoint's perspective. Adding security features that are easily disabled are completely pointless. We are all about prevent. I am all about prevent, and that's all there is to it. I feel The industry has misled everybody for some time. I'm happy to work for one of the companies that has never said the things that some of our competition says. Detection's fine. Remediation's okay. Don't block your network traffic. It'll cause an operational outage. Things like that. They're telling the ops people what they want to hear in order to get their coins. Give us your quarters. It's okay. What really happens is you get breached. And then you can say, hey, you guys sell a service that helps me with this too, right? What's wrong with that model? Seriously, what is wrong with that model? I'm going to sell you a box that shows you you're screwed. But if you call me, maybe I can keep you from getting fired with this team of people that'll come in. I'm supposed to be agnostic. I have a hard time with business models like that. It's very clearly some companies, and there is not just one that actually operates that way. About half of our competition have teams and act like that. Is what it is. I don't believe it. Lastly, what is the job of the security department? Anybody? We're all in IT security here, so everybody has an answer, right? It should not be slow stuff down. Really? It's to manage risk. That's it. Pure and simple. That's all we're supposed to be doing is managing risk, right? Well, with all of those solutions being thrown at you, how do you handle that? Oh my God, look at all these choices we have to make. Well, simply put, to secure all this infrastructure, you need a security tool that is easy. I'm not saying you need a big red easy button, but you do need a tool that allows you to automate everything. Because once you can get to that level where you can automate everything, the complaints from your ops people start to go away. Security slows my job down. It's the firewall's fault. That's a great Dilbert slide. I think every firewall admin's cube I've ever visited has it. But APIs can eliminate that problem because it forces everybody to do it up front. It forces you to think about it and not come back and say, we need to do service chaining. Okay, what's your plan? Oh, we just deployed 3,000 VMs. Oh. Okay, well, guess what? It's actually not that bad to retro that type of environment. And the other thing, let me get my point. I got stuff out of order. The other point about that is that this automated service that we're talking about, automatically deploying security of any flavor, your vendors better be on their best behavior and do a good job, because 5 years from now, it's going to be that easy to replace any of us. Because in an SDN landscape where things are all automated and scripted, if I don't like this widget, what do? All I got to do is change the flow to a different inspection point and turn off the one I don't like. That means things better work. From my perspective, right? And if you're the champion of this technology that you've had for 10 years, for your sake too, obviously, but, you know, it's a double-edged sword. It forces us to stay honest and work harder at the software level. But it also gives customers leverage. And why would I be standing up here telling you this if it's negative to me? I don't think it's negative to me. I already work for an award-winning company. I don't care. We're going to do a good job. Doesn't matter. So, moving on. There's 3 major points you need to ask any vendor that you're about to engage with in an SDN landscape. 1, can you provide automated insertion of advanced threats, threat prevention solutions? It's pretty simple. The answer to most of them is yes. But these are the 3 things you need to ask. 2, how about automated provisioning of those tools once they're deployed? And what this means is IPS profiles, URL filtering updates, application updates. Say there's an OpenSSL vulnerability. Do I have to wipe that whole thing to fix it? Or can I just, can you just push patch, whatever, that kind of thing? to the security engine, not the whole box. Cattle. Security visibility inside the data center. I need good visibility inside, right down to the VM NIC. Your tools need to do all three of these things. And that's really, really all it comes down to. This one, all right, I'm doing good on time. I was going to close with a little video, and what this is if you've seen a demo from VMware in the last, 2 years, you'll recognize this. This is the vCenter Orchestrator interface. Notice this is not a Checkpoint product. This is just one of the many, many, many orchestrators that I get to deal with daily. It's kind of fun. This is a cookbook. Once I press go, it's going to start doing stuff. And the stuff it's doing is telling a Checkpoint manager. Here's my whole agnostic part, just kind of went out the window for the last minute, but sorry, had to do it. I don't have any demos of other guys' stuff. Essentially, that service chain can get kicked off from a web portal that your admins are using, or it could be an admin clicking go, like in this fashion. And what I'm doing here, and I know it's hard to read, but these are add group, add machines to group, install policy, all of these different things that you would have to do in the dashboard or in your security tool in order to provision this, right? Somebody builds this cookbook ahead of time, and anytime a new pod gets rolled out or whatever, security comes with it. So, as I click go, and I got to get up here so I can pause it. So we're starting. And you see it turning green. Ooh, I missed it, dang it. Anyhow, what it started doing is going through that service chain. So again, that could be initiated through a web portal that your admins have built for their own use or for your IT users' use or whatever. Or it could be somebody building that manually. Now, what we're flipping over to is what is occurring on the Checkpoint side, a la VMware. VMware is telling us what to do. So if I hit go, you're going to see rules. You see objects in the database, and this is all in real time with the dashboard open. All this stuff is just populating because VMware says so. This is a level of integration your tool needs to have. Some of our friends out in the world are doing similar things, but so far, our integration has been tighter. So, these are all machines, these are rules, firewall rule base, there's a threat prevention policy attached here. There's the drop, all the logging, all of that kind of stuff. I provisioned everything. Oh, and the first thing it did, which you can't see in here, was it actually told it to create the virtual gateway in the first place. So it created the virtual gateway, and then it started writing rules around it. And then at the end, the video plays out. And at the end here, you see it actually provision security. Done. That took I talked longer than it took to actually happen. So when I was talking about those three things you have to have, this is it. That's the level. That's where kind of the gold standard should be. From my perspective, that's everything I had to talk about. I will be around for a little while if anybody wants to talk about specific products and how we do that or enable this. But have a great day and